this episode, we take the pressure and mystery out of exam day by giving your brain a few simple mental models and time tactics that work even when you are nervous and tired. People often imagine that success comes from being brilliant in the moment, but most passing scores come from being steady, because steadiness prevents the small mistakes that quietly drain points. A certification exam is not a conversation where you can clarify what a question means, so the best test takers build a predictable way to interpret prompts, eliminate bad answers, and move on without getting emotionally stuck. The goal is not to turn you into a robot, because the goal is to give you a small set of habits that hold you up when your attention wobbles. When your thinking stays calm, you read more carefully, you spot details you would otherwise miss, and you avoid wasting time on questions that are trying to lure you into overcomplicating. What follows is about staying simple on purpose, because simple is what survives stress. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A mental model is just a repeatable way to understand what is happening, and the right one can make a confusing question feel familiar. One model that works well for operations-focused exams is the input, process, output model, where you identify what data or conditions go in, what transformation or decision happens, and what result comes out. Many questions that look like they are about syntax are actually testing whether you can predict outcomes, especially when inputs are missing, malformed, or unexpected. If you train your brain to label these three parts quickly, you become less likely to get tricked by irrelevant details, because you are watching the flow of logic instead of chasing shiny words. Another helpful model is the failure mode model, where you ask what can go wrong first, because operations is where safe behavior under failure matters. When an exam question includes options that assume everything goes right, that is often a clue those options are weaker, because robust automation plans for wrong inputs and partial outages. These models are not extra work, because they are shortcuts that reduce the mental effort of each question. A second mental model that fits this certification is the operator's triangle of safety, predictability, and visibility. Safety means the automation avoids causing harm when something is off. Predictability means you can anticipate results reliably. And visibility means you can verify what happened using signals like logs and structured output. Many exam questions reward the option that increases one of these without badly damaging the others, because that is how real operations decisions are evaluated. If two answers both solve the stated problem, the better one is often the one that is safer by default or easier to verify afterward. This is especially true when the question involves loops, parsing, or dependencies, because those are common sources of drift and silent failure. When you keep this triangle in mind, you are less likely to choose the clever answer that looks elegant but is brittle. Under stress, this triangle also helps you eliminate choices quickly, because you can ask which option improves predictability and which option makes visibility worse. A third model is the difference between what the question is asking and what it is describing, because exam writers love to add background that feels important but is not. The description gives you context, like the environment, the data type, or the operational goal, but the ask is usually a specific decision, such as choosing the safest behavior or the most reliable way to validate. One simple tactic is to locate the decision point, meaning the exact place where you must choose among alternatives, and then focus your attention on what would make one alternative better than the others. If you find yourself thinking about everything at once, you are more likely to overthink and misread. Another tactic is to restate the question to yourself in plain language, because if you cannot restate it, you do not really understand it yet. This does not need to take long, because it can be a quick phrase like, they want the safest default when input is wrong, or they want the most reliable parsing method. That short restatement becomes your anchor when answer options start trying to pull your attention in different directions. Time tactics matter because most people do not run out of knowledge. They run out of clock while wrestling with uncertainty. The first time tactic is pacing, and pacing starts with accepting that you will not solve every question perfectly. If you treat each question like a personal challenge that must be conquered, you will spend too long on a few and then rush the rest, which is where points bleed away. A better approach is to make a quick first-pass decision on whether you can answer now, answer with elimination, or need to return later. The key is not to guess randomly, but to avoid sinking 10 minutes into a problem that is not yielding, because that time could earn you multiple easier points elsewhere. When you move forward, you also reduce anxiety, because progress calms the brain. The exam is a marathon of attention, and pacing protects attention. A practical way to pace is to use a two-pass method, where Pass 1 captures the questions you can answer confidently or quickly, and Pass 2 focuses on the slower ones. In Pass 1, you aim for controlled speed, meaning you read carefully, but you do not debate yourself endlessly. If you have narrowed the answers down to 2 and you are stuck, you make a choice, mark it mentally, and move on, because lingering creates diminishing returns. In Pass 2, you revisit the hardest questions with whatever time you have left, and you use your mental models to avoid spiraling into complexity. This method works because confidence questions build points early and reduce stress, while hard questions get your best remaining attention later. It also helps you avoid the common trap of spending too much time at the beginning when you are still warming up. Your goal is to spread your attention fairly across the whole exam. Another time tactic is careful reading, and that sounds obvious until you realize how stress changes how you read. Under pressure, people skim, and skimming leads to missing key words like not, best, most likely, or least risky. A simple technique is to slow down just enough to identify the constraints, because constraints are what separate good answers from plausible answers. If the question says the automation must fail safe, that constraint matters more than an option that is fast but fragile. If the question implies a shared environment or cross-team reuse, that constraint favors clarity and parameterization over hard-coded assumptions. Constraints are often where exam writers hide the real point of the question, because they want to see if you can prioritize. When you practice spotting constraints, you stop being surprised by trick questions, because you start expecting them. This is not paranoia, it is pattern recognition. Elimination is the most reliable skill for exam day, because even when you are unsure, you can often identify answers that violate basic principles. One elimination rule is to distrust answers that require perfect conditions, like assuming input is always clean, logs are always available, or dependencies never change. Another rule is to distrust answers that reduce visibility, like options that avoid logging or validation in order to be faster, because visibility is how operation stays sane. A third rule is to distrust answers that sound like magic, where the option promises that a single change will solve multiple unrelated problems without trade-offs. Real automation is full of trade-offs, so the best answer often sounds grounded and slightly boring. When you eliminate one or two clearly bad options, the remaining choices become easier to compare using your mental models. This is how you turn partial understanding into points. Overthinking often shows up when you bring in extra assumptions that are not in the question, usually because you have real-world experience or you have read additional material and want to apply it. The exam is not asking you to design an entire enterprise automation platform in your head, because it is asking you to select the best answer based on the scenario given. A helpful tactic is to treat the question like a closed world, meaning you only assume what it tells you and what is commonly true in general, not what you personally prefer. If an option seems wrong because you can imagine a rare edge case, ask whether the question is actually pointing to that edge case, or whether you are inventing a problem that is not there. This is hard for smart people, because smart people can imagine many possibilities, and that imagination can become a trap. The exam rewards disciplined thinking, not maximum imagination. Another way to avoid overthinking is to recognize the difference between a concept question and an implementation question. A concept question is about principles, like why a safe conditional matters or how to interpret a log signal, while an implementation question would be about exact syntax or exact tool commands. This exam, like many modern ones, tends to lean toward concepts that transfer across environments, even when it uses familiar technologies as examples. So if you catch yourself worrying about a very specific detail, consider whether the question is actually measuring that detail, or whether it is measuring a broader idea like predictability, data integrity, or reliable parsing. This mental shift often makes the answer clearer, because the broader idea is easier to evaluate. It also keeps you from losing time chasing a memory that is not needed. Staying at the right level of abstraction is a major exam day advantage. Your physical and emotional state also affects time and accuracy, so exam day tactics include managing yourself, not just managing questions. If you feel your mind racing, take one slow breath and restart the question from the top, because a 10-second reset can save you 2 minutes of confusion. If you notice you are getting angry at a question, that is a signal to move on, because anger narrows attention and makes reading sloppy. If you are unsure, choose the best answer you can defend with your mental models and then release it, because carrying doubt forward will contaminate the next questions. Confidence is not pretending you are always right. It is trusting your process even when you are uncertain. Your process is what you practiced, and your process should be simple enough to use under stress. Simple processes beat complex plans that require perfect calm. A final tactic is to treat the exam like a series of small wins instead of one giant performance. Each question is one decision, and your job is to make as many good decisions as possible within the time you have. Some questions will feel easy, some will feel unfair, and some will feel like they came from another planet, and that is normal. The mental models and time tactics you built are there, so that the unfair questions do not steal time from the fair ones. When you finish, you want to feel like you stayed steady and used your time intentionally, not like you got dragged around by emotions and guesswork. That steady approach is what passing usually looks like from the inside. If you keep your models simple, respect the clock, and avoid inventing complexity, you give yourself the best chance to score well without overthinking anything.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit DailyCyber.News.